then we can get rolling. But I want to welcome you to our first huddle of 2020. I hope your year is going well. Can everybody hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up. A couple people that can't see their faces, but hopefully they can hear us. Pastor Chris is going to kick off this year with just some things that have been brewing in his heart for the vision, for the fellowship, and the theme of Oasis, and just some things that have been going on. So it's a great time to kick it off. We'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. But if you want to start something in the chat, we can do that as well. We also have we got a bunch of people on Facebook Live as well. So that's exciting to see that. So I'm so grateful that you're all here. And so I'm just going to turn it over to Pastor Chris and let him share his heart a little bit and just see what the Lord's been speaking to him for this year.
Well, Happy New Year, everybody. It's so good to connect with all of you. It's so good to see your beautiful faces. And we decided when we wanted to put the huddles together for this year that everybody felt like it would be good for me to kind of come early this year and talk a little bit about the theme for the year. And as we discussed it, just so you know, my heart is, I'll tell you the theme in just a second if you don't know it already, but my heart, and as we discussed it, we felt like it would be really a good thing if we could talk about how I arrive at a theme, because I think our goal is not just for you to hear our theme, but our goal is for you to be able to possibly say, okay, well, maybe I can look for a personal theme for my year, or maybe I can even go beyond that and look for a theme for my church or ministry, and so forth and so on. So, but the theme for this year, for 2020, if you haven't heard yet, it's time. I've sent out a couple of articles on it, and so ultimately, I'm going to explain in a few minutes why I chose that theme. It's time. I want to share with you the process. Let me just say the theme is not our vision. Elim Fellowship has a vision, and the vision is that we are a Christ-centered worldwide revival fellowship. And so obviously, from my perspective, anytime I would be sharing a theme, it's to see how we can be in alignment with fulfilling that particular season through that theme, our overall vision. So as a Christ-centered worldwide revival fellowship, my heart is to say, okay, how does its time sink in with that overall vision? And then, of course, our mission statement, and you can get all this on our website, but basically our mission statement is to strengthen the leader, to equip the church to reach the world. And we're not just talking equip the local church there, we're talking about to equip the body of Christ, whether they're in missionary or whether they're pastors, leaders, or congregational members of churches. We want to be able to strengthen leaders so that they would be able to equip the church. So, and then this is really the evangelism part of our mission and vision, is to reach the world. And so I'm excited, and that those things were thought through. The mission statement actually came under Pastor Ron Bergio's reign. We actually developed that mission statement. But anyway, the idea here is that the theme, every year that I've had a theme, even when I was pastoring, I had a theme, was that would kind of serve to keep us and navigate our decision making, and navigate how we preach, navigate how we train, and really navigate what we felt God was saying in a fresh season over the next 12 to 14 months from when we kind of birthed it. When I first became the president of Elim, the theme was really just limited to the conference itself. In fact, I had helped Pastor Ron as the general secretary for 10 years, and even a little bit before that, since the days of when we invited Jack Hayford to Elim, I had helped them start to think about having a theme for our leadership conferences. And about 5 or 6 years ago, we actually changed it up, and we ended up, calling the leadership conference Oasis, because we were saying, and we were hearing from people, we don't want it just to be a leadership conference. We want it to be a presence of God conference. We want it to be a conference where people feel like they're they're experiencing God in the conference. So we actually called it Oasis because we wanted to be able to add other avenues and attributes to the conference. But one of the things that I changed when I became the president was the theme is not just for an event. We would just build up for that event. But about 5-6 years ago, I started thinking, well, if we're going to have a theme, why don't we implement that theme throughout the entire year so that people can begin to really get into the theme. And in some ways, the conference is the culmination of that theme already been at work throughout the year. The first year I came here, the theme was honor. And the focus then was to honor those who were before us, because it was new. I was the new guy now. And I just wanted to come in saying, look, I'm here and I want to honor and spend a lot of time honoring the people who came before me, because I felt like when you begin to honor what you're building on, you begin to have a power and a sense of privilege and with going forward. So in 2016, now the reason I'm sharing these with you is because I want you to see that each one of these themes that we had kind of was a season we were in. And so when the first full year that I became active as a president was 2016. And the theme was innovate. And the reason is because we had been traveling, our leadership team here had been traveling around, and we sensed that our churches and our ministries and even individuals needed to tap into the creative nature of God, the fact that he gave us an imagination. And so my heart was to say, let's talk about innovation. How can God begin to do more than we can imagine and create something outside of the box? And then the themes after that, I won't go into each one of them, but they were activate. And that's when we started focusing really strong on the next generation, and then contend for more. That was when I really sensed, I want to talk about that. I sensed that we were in a season where we just needed a good loving hug from God, I guess, is what I was thinking. And again, what we did is say, look, let's contend for more. God wants to do more than we can imagine or think. And so the focus was to reach into God. Now, what was really cool was the following year, which was just last year, the theme was go further. And the focus wasn't so much on what we get from God, but what we get, what God gets from us. And here at Elim Fellowship, for us, quite frankly, 2019, with that theme, go further, it was a year of preparation. In fact, the theme this year, it's time. I actually shared in my Christmas message that it was time because God had already been doing some preparation. And clearly in half of 2018 and then into 2019, we did more preparation than I've seen in a long time here at Elim Fellowship. And most of it was because God was saying, look, where I'm taking you, you got to be prepared for it. And so we actually hired some consultants. We just, we did some things that we began to ask hard questions with 2 or 3 consultants. We had some retreats and so forth and so on. But the idea behind it was God was calling us not to stay where we are, but to go further, go beyond where we had been, and so forth and so on. So those are the themes we have right now in Elim Fellowship. We have 869 credential holders. I mean, that is amazing to me that we have 869 credential holders. 141 of those are missionaries. And we have 22 associate pastors, leaders, and these are people that are not necessarily a credential holder, but they want an associate status with us. They want to relate to us. We have 24 different ministries that are not churches, and we have 111 churches that are official. And then we have 105 of those credential holders who are pastors of churches who are not credentialed with us. So altogether, that totals up to about 869 credential holders. And we feel as a staff very, very much like this is our job. This is our job to strengthen those leaders, to equip the church. And we've been about preparation, but now we're talking about it's time. So I can tell you a little bit more about that.
I think it's good, Pastor Chris. And for those who don't know me, my name is Mark Scorsone. I'm the assistant director to USM, and I'm hosting this huddle here with Pastor Chris, and it's just great to hear his heart. But Pastor Chris, being here on staff, I can see some of the labor pains that you go through on getting a theme. And I know themes are a dime a dozen when you go to a conference. Oh, that's a good theme. That's a good theme. But I know that you really take it serious on what God's saying to you for this year. How do you go about arriving at a theme? What is it, special shower you take? Is it the pizza you eat? What is it that...
Well, sometimes people get things in the shower, but to be honest with you, for me, usually right after the conference, I take a little bit of a rest, because the conference is kind of a culmination of a lot of energy to touch people and encourage people. But usually about 2 or 3 weeks after the conference, I start praying right then and say, God, what do you want to say next year? I mean, my temptation sometimes is to be thinking always ahead because I'm a natural visionary. But I kind of resist that. And then probably around June and the beginning of July, I start saying, God, what are you saying to us as we move forward now, leading into the next several months? And that's strategic. And here's why. Because I want God to speak to me in plenty of time, because usually around September, we have our Council of Elders retreat. And one of the things you need to know, that the way I work is this. I'm seeking God, and then saying, God, start speaking to me about what you think. Now, to be quite honest with you, what I sensed was a sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. I felt like, we've been preparing, we've been talking, we've been sharing how we want to do something, but this overwhelming sense of urgency was coming to me. And so like this, actually one day I was on my treadmill as I was walking on my treadmill, and I was just thinking of different phrases that could, kind of spell out that urgency that I was feeling. And without going into all the details, I basically, right on that treadmill, I was saying, it's time. It's just time right now. Okay. And out of that, I brought it to my exec team, which is Alex Seidler, Joe Jansen, who's online here. Alex, by the way, right now is overseas in China, getting ready to go to Thailand. And here we're praying for China and all of our workers and missionaries. I probably shouldn't be saying that on live, but the missionaries all around the world and the church all around the world facing this crisis of this flu and this virus. And so I just want to encourage you all to join us in praying for these people who are battling this, regardless of who they are and what they do. But anyway, in all of that, I just want to say that what I start doing is this. I start asking, what is the present need at Elim Fellowship? What is going on in the world right now that seems to be something we need to be, as a fellowship, tapping into? What is the Holy Spirit saying to us? So a combination of these kinds of things. What are the conditions? Where are we at along the trajectory to some of the goals that we have? And these are the things I'm asking as I'm sort of trying to figure out what a theme would be. And as I mentioned earlier about Innovate, I knew that at that time I brought up Innovate, that we were in a place where I felt like, you know what, we've been doing the same old things in our churches and ministries. Can we get outside the box? Can we look at things that we should stop? Can we look at things that we should start? Can we look at things that we haven't even thought of yet that God would reveal? And again, out of that came Innovate. And with its time, there was this sense of urgency. It's that this coming year, which is the year we're in right now, really, is, this is how I was thinking back in July, that the next 12 to 14 months, we need to get busy. We need to say it's time to quit talking about what we want to do and start doing some things. And so that's kind of pretty much how I do it. I take it to the elders retreat, and listen to me. If the elders are not with me, I'm not going to move on that theme. I'll go back to the drawing board. But the elders, I've been graced with them shaping it with me a little bit. But my exec team, which is, again, Joe Jansen, Alex, Phil McNeil, and myself, I pass it by them. It was really cool in this particular year because Joe and Alex in particular had already been thinking that. And I'm pretty sure that it was Alex that said that something about time. And then I said, well, let me tell you, it's time. And everybody in the room sensed it. And then in our elders retreat in September, I was able to share with them. So I'm building the momentum, but it's not only mine, there's ownership in this coming from, the Elim Fellowship's covering, the elders, and so forth and so on. So that's kind of what happened there. That's how I formed it.
That's good. I've been a part of some of these meetings that you've had here at the fellowship on the strategic planning and just processing what's in your heart as a team. Can you expand on that a little bit more? What that really means and what's cooking in your heart with that.
I will. In July of 2018, right before I had my open heart surgery, we had a consultant come in from Las Vegas. He's a church consultant. He was somebody, I wanted to have somebody who was not a part of who we were, an outside consultant. And I brought him in and I picked people. And again, you heard some of this at last year's conference. And we were asking, what can we do to accomplish our goals and visions? And those 2 days meeting with him, we really went through some real hard questions. We came to a place. And so that's why we came up with the theme that year, Go Further, because of the sense of the heavy stuff that was on us. And quite frankly, I feel like we're still battling some of that stuff. And I think out of that came the whole idea of it's time, because to be honest with you, I know right now that people continue to talk about what they want to do, but they don't pull the trigger. And I believe that's what God is saying to us. I think he's saying that to us as a movement, as a whole fellowship, but I think he's saying it to some of our pastors, leaders, missionaries, and other leaders around the world. I think he's saying it's time to pull the trigger. So I started pulling the trigger. I started saying to the elders, hey, we got to do this. And we're pulling the trigger. We're going to fish or cut bait. We're going to start moving forward or we're going to be stuck another year. And I don't want to go another year around the lap. In fact, one of the phrases I wrote in my notes as I was preparing this is, I don't want to drop the baton and then have to go a whole nother lap, or not pass the baton in time in the block where God wants us to, and then have to go a whole nother lap. I felt it's time. And so, Mark, that's kind of what I was going after. Now, there's 4 words that I want to share with you that I look for. Number 1 is unity. I'm looking for my team to have unity. That's important to me. I don't want to be ahead of them. I want us to be unified. Right. Number 2, clarity. I have to be able to, if I'm going to ask these folks to be a part of a theme for a particular year or for a particular project, there's got to be clarity. I got to understand, what does that really mean? It's time. And I shared some things with the leaders. It's time to stop doing this. It's time to start doing this. And these kinds of statements came out. And then I think after unity and clarity, conviction. We cannot move unless we have equal conviction. You can have clarity, but still not have conviction. Once those 3 are in place, unity, clarity, and conviction, then I could move with confidence, and so could other people. So the heart behind it is to do that. Now, out of that, we came up with sort of a new statement. In fact, we have 3 or 4 of these statements that kind of still help us shape them. Now, these are internal statements. We're going to give you a little insight to what we came up with as some of the statements that we have that help us define, so we can stay on track. And when we say it's time to make a change, or it's time to stop something or start something, that it fits into our overall vision, and we called it an elevator pitch. And I'm gonna have to read this because I don't have it memorized, and it's a little long. But I want to read this to you. And as a part of Elim Fellowship, I just want you to hear this. And I would really challenge you as you're preparing possibility a theme for an event or a year like we have, that you be able to couch it in the context of your vision statement. So here's how we would talk about Elim Fellowship today. We said, we are a global family of spirit-filled leaders that is determined to stand with others with like vision. And then I go on to say, we provide easy on-ramps for people to be a part. Now listen to that phrase, easy on-ramps. We are saying it's time to help people become a part of us. It's time to give on-ramps. It's time to take care of these folks. We provide easy on-ramps for churches, ministries, pastors, missionaries, global people, and so forth and so on. And so I'm just like totally, psyched about being able to say, hey, all these people, we want easy on-ramps for them to get to us so they can be a part of our family. And we say this in order to walk with them and take steps to embrace their individual visions. That's one of the things that's beautiful about Elim Fellowship. We're not asking everybody to do the same thing. We're saying, how can we serve you? And it's time that we get on board helping you serve. I opened up let me just be transparent with you. I opened up the beginning of this year, and I know I shared something about this, praying for every single one of those credentials holders, all 840, plus some others who were still on our website who are no longer with us. And I was praying individually, looking at their pictures, and God began to just give me a deeper burden and heart for all of our leaders. And I came back to my team and I said, listen, it's time that we do what we can to improve how we serve them. It's time that we begin to look for ways to recruit more people to come to this group so that we can reach out to others. Again, the vision and the theme started just stirring in me. And so anyway, and then obviously ever since I've been on board, one of the things I've focused on is our passion is to intentionally raise up new generation of spiritual leaders. And it's time. It's time. And I just want you to know I'm so excited about what God wants to do here at Elim Fellowship. And when I got this theme, it's time, it starts to make me look at everything and say, is it time? Is it time to stop that? Or is it time to start that? Is it time to do something new? So that's kind of what my heart is in that area.
Yeah, what's really cool with some of the feedback that we get with some of our pastors and ministries out there is that they've taken hold of the theme that God's given you for the year, and they've kind of run with it in their churches. So if you folks out there, if you have like a testimony of that, once we get to the Q&A of just how maybe you wrote on the vision for your church and ministries and something that happened in your church, it'd be really cool to hear some of that thing on how it just kind of spreads out for the whole thing. So I'd like to hear some of that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, I know we do that for Saturate. We run on like we're doing, we're not calling it It's Time, but maybe for such a time as this, and just something along those lines. Like to piggyback on that and just run with it, because it's really cool what
Yeah, one of the things that's done my heart really good, and when I pastored, I felt this way too, is when I go around to churches and stuff, and people have said to me, they've really heard the theme, go further, like last year. And it just, you're right, Mark, it just does it does me wonders when I see that people are really grabbing the theme. And I'm not asking them to make that theme for their church, but I am, as a connection to Elim, saying, use this theme, run with this theme, use it. Let's join together and do something great as a whole movement. So that's kind of.
And like it did with your team when you went in there, and then Alex was saying, I just feel like it's something with time. It could be just confirming what's already in their heart.
Yeah.
And they can have the confidence to run with it. So that's really cool. And I think it's one of the values that the fellowship brings with connect with some things. But any other tidbits about how you any other things about the theme that's in your heart?
Yeah, let me kind of go a little deeper with now. I've kind of been focusing a little bit more on how to get the theme and then the
Right.
process. And hopefully I'm inspiring you to think about that for yourself. So let me talk a little bit more detail about what It's Time means to me. It started out with three phrases. In fact, I shared these with the Council of Elders in our September retreat last year. And I came up with three things. I think God gave them to me because I think this is the spirit of what God was saying. Number one, it's that we need to embrace revival. Let me just say something about that. I love the church. I absolutely love the church. And I love the church that's way beyond Elim Fellowship. I love the different movements. I love to see what God is doing in different movements. And one of the things that I was seeing, in fact, one of our key leader elders, an older elder, was saying to me, God is doing something out there in the world, and do not be afraid to link into something or tap into some of the things that God is doing in other places. And I think some people are experiencing elements of revival. Now, when you start talking about revival, that's a whole different subject. But I just want to say that I believe God does different expressions at different seasons in different ways with different groups about revival. But I felt it was time for us to embrace revival and not just keep hoping for it, but is there something that God wants to do in us? It's time to embrace revival for us personally. And is there something for Elim Fellowship? Is there a ministry out there? Is there something that we can learn or gain from other ministries that are experiencing revival with younger people, with music and so forth? In fact, just so you know, one of the reasons that we have the lineup that we do for this year's Oasis, we have Havilah coming from the Bethel group, because God's doing something unique in that area. And we're excited about what God is using her for in areas of leadership. She's had a ministry towards purity and all kinds of different things, but she's making a shift, and she's a part of a movement that's having expressions that a lot of people are being drawn to. Another person is Lee Cummings. We're asking Lee to come because he's in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And me and my team, my exec team here, we went out to Kalamazoo and got to experience what God was doing in their conferences out there. And we just said, let's invite him to come and maybe pick up something. That's, by the way, very much a part of who Elim has been for years and years and years. I remember Elim Fellowship when I first came in 30 years ago, reaching and networking and connecting. And in fact, I recently was at a conference, and David Ireland called me up, prophesied over me, and said, hey, you know what, Pastor Chris, I think God has made you to be able to dip in other ponds, dip in other pools. And so I'm constantly looking for ways that I can learn and grow. And I think that's a part of what it is. Embrace revival, God's expression of the church, and network it and get something from others. And hopefully we can give to others as well. So the first thing I felt it's time to do is embrace revival. The second thing is I feel like we need to change. It's time to change. My heart is I want to be changed from glory to glory, faith to faith, strength to strength. But I also feel like that if what I'm doing now is not working, then what needs to change? And so I think instead of just talking about it, maybe this is the year it's time for a change. And that could mean a myriad of things for pastors, leaders, and churches and ministries out there. It can mean so many different things. For here at Elim Fellowship, one of the changes that we've made is we're saying we want to be able to figure out how to get people connected to us and make easy on-ramps. And so instead of having a credential Christian worker as the on-ramp, we introduced what I introduced last year, Friends of Elim. And so now people can join us, and we welcome people to join us. We have, I think we're up to around 30 people who have become Friends of Elim with us. And so we're looking for more of that. The mindset of recruiting has become a big change for us. Like in Elim Fellowship, we've kind of been shy about that kind of language. For years and years, it's like, well, whatever God's doing, we don't want to sound boisterous and we don't want to say bragatory. But God said, listen, we have something to give. we have something that people would want to be a part of. And we're focusing on our strengths. And so guess what? We are not afraid now to say we want to recruit. And by that, I mean, look for people who have a call on their lives, and start to say, hey, come to this meeting, come with me, and hang out. Let's connect, because it's time to change. And that's one area of change for us. And then the last one is we need to, it's time to recruit and experience a great awakening. I think every time I talk to a pastor, they believe this. We're right on the edge. We're right on the edge of God doing something great in this country. And, we live in an interesting time when it comes to the political world, when it comes to all kinds of things. All you have to do is go on Facebook and see the dialogues that are going on. But I believe it's time for us to believe God for a great awakening in this nation. And it's going to happen when we say, come on, God, it's time. So that's kind of the heart of it. I could give you another 25 things, Mark, in regards to, we're what it's time to do and what it's time not to do. One of the things that's very, very practical is I said this: it's time for people to live their destiny.
Right.
It's time for people to multiply their impact, and it's time for people to release revival. These are the three things that are heavy on my heart. I really want people to reach their destiny. I want people to live their dreams. And it's time. Take the next step, whatever we need to do to move towards this. So that's kind of my heart.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Just for like individuals and churches or ministries.
Yeah. Again, like I said, the heart behind it for me is that a lot of times, like, I find people that are they're really hungry, but they're not willing to take just one step, the very next step. And I think that's kind of what I would encourage is out of this, even this chat here that we're having right now. I would hope we go away and say, hey, God, what are you saying to me it's time to do? By the way, this whole thing, once I got that phrase from God, I actually went into the word for about 3-4 weeks on the word time. I looked up every word in the Bible that had to do with time. Things like now is the day of salvation. The hour is not yet come. On and on and on through the Bible. But God landed me in the book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 14, where Mordecai was talking. Obviously, we all know that story. But Mordecai was talking to Esther. This ruler had come along and said to the king, let's go ahead and kill every single Jew that's alive. And the king actually even funded it, gave him money to be able to do all this. And Mordecai, he sent a servant to Esther and said, listen, this is going to happen unless somebody stands up. And Esther, I believe you're the person. And she said, I'm not sure. There was this hesitation and so forth. And then Mordecai said to her, listen, if you don't do it, do you think you're going to escape what's going to happen? And then this is what he said to Esther. Is it not possible that you might have just been created for such a time as this? And I sense that was the spirit of what it means. It's time. Listen, I believe God's going to bring revival and awakening to this earth. I believe God's going to bring an amazing thing. I just believe the church is going to succeed. I believe the church is going to step in to lives of people who are hurting in this world that we have. I believe that it's just crazy what's happening, in this earth right now. But I believe the church, this is our day. And I think, this is what I think. Let Elim Fellowship be marked as a people of God, that we said it's our responsibility. We're not going to let others take our place. It's kind of like, we're not going to let the rocks cry out, like, it says in the New Testament. We're going to step up to the game, and it's time for us to get involved. It's time for us to engage in this world. And in fact, we're getting ready to have a key leaders retreat. Joe Jansen is working real hard right now on the agenda for the key leaders retreat we have down in Florida, where we're training our key leaders and how they might serve others. And he's given me a spot, and I'm going to be challenged. I'm going to be challenging those guys and gals. I'm going to say to them, listen, it's time for us to start really reaching out to other people who are not connected with the body. We need to recruit. We need to step up the game, and we need to do it. It's time. Because listen, it's going to happen. God's going to do it. I just want him to do it through me and you. Amen. And so that's kind of the heart and the passion behind this whole thing. It's time. The way I said it, it's time to fish or cut bait. I wrote these statements down. It's now or never. Fish or cut bait. Put up or give up. And I won't say some of the other ones that are out there that represent that phrase. But it's time to get off the pot, if you will, and let's move on from that phrase. But the idea is God saying to us as a movement, it's time. It's time. It's time.
Yeah, I guess what I really hear you saying, it's our time.
It's our time.
It's our time to
It's our time.
step up with what God's been brewing in our hearts, vision, and moving forward. And we've been on the on deck circle for years, and now it's that person's out of the batter's box, and it's now time for us to step up and
that's good.
What we're going to do with it. And so that's
good.
Really encouraging. I'm sure you got a bunch more scriptures that could support all this stuff that's been in your heart. You got any key ones that you just want to leave with the folks here before we go into a little Q&A?
Yeah. And by the way, I wrote an article that we're going to actually put up on the chat line and connect it somehow to you. And we have all your emails. I've already sent it out once, but it's an article where I kind of went into the Bible and talked about the theology of time. But I'll tell you the main scripture. I mean, there's all kinds of scriptures I have here, and there's teaching that you can do about Chronos versus Kairos, and all. But the scripture that really captivated me was when I went back into the passage that I actually used in Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 through 46, where Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And by the way, John's version of this is in John chapter 17, where we see the prayer. And in John chapter 17, verse 1, he starts out with saying, "My hour has now come." And all through the Bible, different places, Jesus had said, "My hour is not yet, my hour is not yet, my hour is not yet." But in that passage in Matthew, it says in Matthew 26, verse 36, and right after that, Jesus was frustrated over what was going on. His human nature was battling with the cross that was before him. And it says, "Can you pray for me, disciples?" And all of a sudden, he said, Jesus went a little further. And that's when God spoke to me about the theme for last year. So I was kind of reading that through, and all of a sudden, in verse 45, it says this. It says, 3 times now he'd said, "Not my will, but mine be done." 3 times he asked the disciples to pray. And then in context, he said this, "Now the hour has come," which is interpreted, it's time. And so for me, that's the home run verse for me. That was like, Jesus knew this is the time. This is the time, and God had prepared him up to that time in the 3 years he had served as a minister, the 30 years before as a young boy. Now is the time to go ahead and save the world through my redemptive act on the cross. And when I saw that, I said, there's many different times all through the Old Testament. It says it this way in the Old Testament more often than not. It says, at the appointed time, God met them. At the appointed time, God brought this person here or person there. All throughout the scripture, even though God's in charge of the clock, there's times he says, now's the time. Right. And in my spirit, I feel it's time.
Right. Well, speaking of time, I think it's time to start going into a little Q&A.
Hey, man, I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's some great thoughts out there. But as you guys are, go ahead and unmute yourselves, and then we'll get to some questions here. I just want to bring you up to speed. I know Pastor Chris mentioned a little bit about Oasis. Registration is now open. You can get on the website and register yourself or your team. Deadline ends in April sometimes. That's all that information's on the website. He mentioned Havilah Cunningham and Pastor Lee Cummins. We also have David Ham, who spoke at Saturate and really rang the bell, and his father, Gary. And you guys all know Gary. He's just a tremendous communicator. And,
Wonderful.
they're also going to be installing.
Insulating. He
Probably insulating him
will
too.
need to be insulated.
He does. Dr. Fred Antonelli over at the Elim Bible Institute in college. So that's going to be a great thing. And also we have some other huddles coming up here starting in February. We have Gary Ingram, who's going to do a 3-series huddle with us on sexuality in the church. And I think this is huge. Get your team, get anybody on there that would really want to get some teaching out of how to minister to this huge hot topic in our country and our nation. So he'll have 3 of them starting February, March, and April, and all the dates are online. You can click on the calendar and view everything there. Sign up right there. We also have Carol Ball, who's going to be doing 3 huddles for the women leading up to her HERCON conference, and then we'll hear again from Pastor Chris in early May before the Oasis conference. So those are some huddles that are happening here in the first quarter. Really excited about it. Pass the word around. We're trying to get the word of these huddles out. They're free to anybody who wants to join. So if you think someone could benefit from it, we'd really love to just have them join on and go from there. Also have my youth leader and kids leader summit coming in March 2021. And Gary Ingram is going to be here for that as well. He does a lot of teaching to young people and leaders. So I think this is just a huge topic in the culture that we live in and just need to embrace it. Again, really thrilled that you're all here. If anybody has a question, we got a good 15 minutes here. Go ahead and fire them for Pastor Chris. I'm sure he'd love to hear your heart.
Great.
I don't have a question, just a comment if I could.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting this on. I really appreciate it. I know, Pastor Chris, you mentioned earlier in the fall about the theme for this year, and just a little testimony. I ran with that in my own personal life. It's time for many things to happen in my own personal life, but in our ministry, and God is exploding in 2 areas. In our men's ministry, our theme has been "It's Time," and our men's gatherings have doubled, nearly tripled in attendance.
Come on.
Guys are realizing it's time to get serious with their relationship with Christ, their relationship with their wives, their children. We've got a men's, we call it Man Camp, coming up in the fall of this year. I've recruited 5 churches already.
Wow.
To be almost 100 guys are coming out to that. You talk about recruiting. I've got, it's time, 4 pastors that are ready to get credentialed with Elim.
Come on.
And the last thing that has been on my heart for years, and you helped ignite that, it's time to connect with the inner city.
Amen.
Pastors in the inner city. And God has opened up doors for me to meet more pastors in the city of Detroit in just the last several months. And we're meeting monthly, sometimes weekly. And so I just want to thank you. This theme has just ignited something in me. So thank you very much. Hallelujah.
Thanks for your sharing.
Thanks, Mark. Hey, I kind of misspoke there a little bit. If you could keep yourself muted and then unmute yourself when you want to ask a question, that'll help with some background noise. Anybody else has a question out there? Mark, I love those guns back there. Are you going to recruit with them?
That's how we do it in Detroit, brother.
You have to.
Somebody jump in there.
Don't be shy.
Chris, this is Dan Whitley.
Hey, Dan Whitley.
This is my first time looking at the huddle, and I really appreciate your sharing. And Mark, you're, I guess,
Hosting.
running this thing. And the thing that keeps running through my mind, I'm, quote, retired, although I'm going to do a memorial service on Saturday, and I did a wedding last week in Atlanta, so I'm still
not really retired.
Doing some things. You don't retire, but for someone who doesn't have a church, that I'm pastor of. I'm part of it. You've been to our church, Chris, so you know
Sure.
where we are. But it just, things run through my head. Or what should I be doing? What should I be doing?
Sure.
And it's time for what as a retired person. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
anyway, I keep listening to the Lord, and I appreciate all the ministry that Elim gives to us. And thank you.
Yeah, can I just speak to that real quickly for everyone here? I really believe, I just recently heard a podcast. It was by Gordon MacDonald. It was an interview with Gordon MacDonald, and he was talking on that interview about, I think he's 80 years old, about when he was 65, that God began to redefine his as the way I would word it. He worded a calling, but he talked about being a father, and I believe God is calling us, those of us who have been around, to be fathers and mothers to the daughters and sons. And I really believe it's time to link arms with the next generation and become mothers and fathers. That's a big deal for me right now, because I understand that tension that goes on when people start to retire. What do I do now? I've been defined by my role as a pastor. I've been defined by this way. But I believe God is raising up a new generation of mothers and fathers to pour into, to embrace. So I just want to mention that, because that's something that was actually in my notes that I skipped over. I just want to bring that up. So God bless you, Dan.
Good.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
One thing I found in traveling back and forth to the conference, we kind of bring a group along with us, some of our credential holders from our area.
Yeah.
And Chet Swearingen that's with us, one thing he started challenging us to do on our trip, and it'd be great even in certain areas, those that are a part of the conference, what are your takeaways?
Yeah.
And challenging us to share. We do that. We have a 7-hour drive back to Indiana. So we got a lot of time to share, and it's really been challenging, because I think out of that just helps to even build then that theme and direction.
Absolutely.
For the year right into your spirit as you're just receiving from the Holy Spirit, not just at the conference, but then gleaning from each other what the Holy Spirit's been showing us on an individual basis.
Yeah.
And, we've seen some tremendous change through that.
That's good. It's amazing.
Good. Yeah, we appreciate you guys coming out. Not only that, but you bring your group out to saturate all the time. Just the commitment you have. Really appreciate it. I like the beard too.
Thanks.
If we can't do it up here, we might as well have it come out here, right?
That's right. It'd be a big comb over.
Yeah, I'm going to extend my eyebrows.
Hey, Chris, I have a question.
Hey, Bruce.
Yeah, well, I love it. I love that the Lord gave you that. It's, now's the time, and pull the trigger and those kinds of phrases. Let me bounce into the last thing that you just talked about, which is being fathers and mothers to the next generation. What do you think? Like, if we were going to start tomorrow afternoon with, okay, I'm going to apply that. Now's the time. What are the steps that you would recommend someone takes in order to do that?
To become a mother or father?
Yeah. And to really, to apply what you've just said, hey, now's the time. So to that, just that part.
Yeah. Well, obviously, all of us are in locations where there are young people. I think obviously there has to be a chemistry that's there, but I think I'd start anything I'm doing with prayer and saying, God, begin to lead me. Begin to make there be an attraction about me that would draw the next generation leaders to come and want to connect in such a way that I could pour into their heart. So I think it begins with prayer, because God knows, he already knows which young person that you can pour into, and which one will be a waste of energy, and which one will be energy well received. And not that it's a waste, but there's some people that do use and are better stewards. So you want to be, especially because you're talking about fathering and mothering, you really need to make sure that's not wasted and it's not poured out on the ground. So I think it starts with prayer. Second thing, I think you've got to look at who is already around you that you can begin to knock on that door, ask them for coffee, take some first steps. hey, I've been praying for you. I've been talking to the Lord about you. Would you be open to meet with me? I just feel like here's what I would say in fitting with Elim Fellowship's vision and what we're saying nowadays. Who seems to have a call on their life? If it's not somebody that's in ministry, who seems to have a call on their life? Obviously, we can help people. We have people that are, that are in ministry that we can pour into. But my heart today, more than ever, is to say, who's in our churches? Who's in those pews who have a call on their life? This past week, I was down in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Met with one of our churches. Got to do an ordination service, and while I'm talking, again, it was coming out of me, my heart for the next generation. My heart. Listen, the next generation is going to be drawn to leaders like you and me when we don't have an attitude that we know it all, when we don't have an attitude that it's got to be done our way, when we start to speak about the positive things we see in next generation leaders. And by the way, millennials are 30 years older and up now. The Gen Z is who I'm even knocking on doors. Just this past week, I had an opportunity to take one of the seniors here at Elim Bible Institute in college out to lunch. And I said, hey, we're not going to eat at the cafeteria today. I'm going to take you to lunch. And in that hour, that young man must have asked me more questions. So look for people who are hungry. Look for people who are ready and who have a calling. So those are 3 steps that come to my mind. And I actually practiced that. I literally practiced it this week. It was great. Thanks.
Thanks, Pastor Bruce. Anthony, you got anything out there from New Jersey? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, what's up, Pastor Chris? Great to see you.
Good to see you, Anthony.
Love being on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a youth pastor, I just really am thankful I've really been encouraging these kids to just take that next step, to really share their stories. And it's been amazing to hear their testimonies and them just opening up to real life situations that they're dealing with and just how God is working in their lives. But also just encouraging them to be leaders.
Right.
And serving in the church on not just, coming to youth ministry, but serving on Sundays. And that's really been kind of a challenge. And I don't know if you have any ideas of how to better just encourage these kids that God, I try to encourage them that God is using them now, even as that Gen Z, these young kids, that they have a voice. And we really try to do that. But sometimes they're hesitant. And I don't know if you just have any other ways or ideas that we can encourage them.
Well, this young man I met with this past week, I'll keep him, I'll keep it anonymous. But when he sat down with me, he's getting ready to have an amazing opportunity for him. He's going to go to a church. It's the perfect thing for a senior at EBI and C right now. He's going to go back to a church that has got a position ready for him. But he feels like probably Timmy did when the apostle said, don't look down on your youth, But this kid was asking me real questions. And I just found the gold in the guy. And I just said, here, start with the gold. Don't try to be something. He was kind of really frustrated and wondering whether or not, whether he was unable to live up to the expectations. Well, let me tell you something. All my life, I haven't been able to live up to the expectations of other people. But I know that there's gold in these younger people. And I think you're doing a great job, Anthony. I think the best thing to do is just keep fanning the flame on the gifts that they already have. And then you'll see things rise up in them, and stand with them and walk with them when they don't do something really up to performance, maybe, because the truth is I'm not doing everything up to performance either. And so be real, be loving, be encouraging, and point the way.
That's great. Thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Still riding your motorcycle in this weather?
You know it.
Hey, we got a couple more minutes. Anybody else have anything on their heart that
Can I just this is Eric Jenkins. I just wanted to add something. I actually am living down in Westfield, Pennsylvania. I work with Wayne Lehman. I did go to EBI
Oh, yeah.
back in 2011. what Wayne did for me, because I definitely I felt like I had a serious lack when I came down to him when they asked me to come and be a part of their ministry. Wayne just spent time pouring into me. He would sit around and he would just randomly tell me, "You're a good man, and you're a warrior, and you're a child of God," and he would call me man of God and
Awesome.
things like that. And those were the things. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but as he poured those things, those
Sure.
were the things that actually helped me get over myself and what I didn't see, and
That's
helped
good.
me to see something beyond. So it's like where the Bible talks about we speak those things that are not as though they were. You see something beyond what you see right now, which is what Christ does to us,
Yeah.
and then you just speak those things, and it will take somebody to a whole different level if you will be faithful to do that.
Right.
That's true. God bless you, man.
It's kind of what Mordecai did to Esther, wasn't it? That he
Hey,
saw something
exactly.
in her that she didn't even see in herself, and he spoke to that, and
Yeah.
she rose to the occasion, mainly because of what Mordecai saw in her. As
Yep.
a 17-year-old girl, when they look in the mirror, they don't see what other people see, and so that's awesome.
It's good.
Drew it out. Thanks.
Awesome.
Anybody else before we close?
Yeah, Mark.
Hey, Nelson, how are you, buddy?
What's going on, bro?
Oh, you know.
Listen, it's just so interesting, and I thank you so much, Pastor Chris, for sharing your heart. And I see it more like a universal thing that God is really doing. It wasn't
Amen.
just that he impressed it in your heart, but I'm hearing it all over. And in fact, I just shared at a men's retreat, and it was about vision, but it was also about it's time for that vision to be fulfilled by God. And I really see like God is really just pouring out, and it's gonna. I really believe that this is it. It's time.
It is time.
It's pretty much the theme. I think the women's retreat is gonna have something with time. It's gonna.
Yeah.
It's just so, and you know what? It's time, and I really want to say this, and I don't take too much time, but time to cast the net, time to reconnect, time to connect, time, even what you were saying about we have not many fathers. It's so true. We do not. And it's time for fathers and sons to get back together. It's time for us to, yes, mentor or to love upon and to just be there for. So thank you. I really have to thank you for that.
Good.
Oh yeah, but it's time. You know that in our church, we actually said, hey, you know what? It's time for us to get some elders, because it's, we've been waiting, and God is actually saying it's time. It's just time. It's time to move, time to get unstuck. And I really believe that that's what happens to a lot of us in our respective churches or ministries or whatever. We get stuck. We get stuck in the old. We get stuck in what used to be. We get stuck in what we want it to be. And we get, and sometimes we can't even hear God say, it's time. Come on, move on. Let's go on.
It's good, brother.
By the way, looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, I'll see you in a couple days, man.
I love you, man.
Love you too. Bless you, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Nelson. Appreciate that. Got time for one more if somebody's got one last thing on their heart. Well, we did it. We did it within an hour. I want to thank everybody for coming on and also getting on the website for all the stuff for Oasis to register, the huddles, Joe's coaching, online coaching. There's a free session for anybody. If you want to pass this around to your peeps as well, a free session if they sign up before February 8th. They can get a free coaching session with Joe and his team. So, Pastor Chris, any last words before we sign off?
Yeah, just so you know, I really believe that this is our year at Elim Fellowship. I don't know what we'll see and say at the end of this year, but I just know that God has been speaking. It's time for us. And I think we're going to hear more and more testimonies like the ones we've already begun to hear, where people have just said, hey, this year I made a big decision. And I know of 2 churches that have changed their names. That's a big decision, but it was time. It is time. And so God is calling us up to do some things. So I just would say, in light of everything I've shared, take some time to pray. Take some time to just wait on the Lord and begin to say, is this the time to take a risk? I honestly believe that there are people at Elim Fellowship that it's time to pass the baton. I believe there are leaders, it's time to stop doing what they're doing and give somebody else a chance. But I also think that God is not finished with those people who pass the baton and stop doing what they're doing, because it's time to do something new and reinvent themselves. So I really believe God's going to do great things at Elim Fellowship, and I wouldn't begin to try to put it on anybody, but I do pray that you join me in praying for a great year. And I speak blessing on your churches. I speak blessing on your ministries, your families, your kids. And I just want to say, God bless you all. And thanks a lot for taking some time to be with us. It's time.
Yeah. And in the chat button there, or the chat section, you can see a link to Pastor Chris's article on It's Time that he wrote. There's also a link to Oasis and some different things there. But once again, awesome. Thanks, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed it. Give us any feedback that would help us make these a little bit better. But thanks for being a part of our tribe. Love you.
Amen. Love you guys.
Take care.
Blessings on you. Love you.
Amen.